we are beginning our session. A good afternoon to everyone. My name is Caroline Mutalema, and I will be your host for today. Our main discussion of today is titled Implementing the African Free Continental Trade Area, and we'll have a focus on women and youth. In just a brief, the free trade area that we are going to discuss about is mainly based in Africa, and it was signed by different African countries with the aim of eliminating the trade barriers and tariffs. And for our presenters today, they will have a deep discussion and display of this matter to us all. And among our presenters, we shall have Advocate Edwin Kimani, who is an advocate from Kenya. Therefore, I would like to welcome Mr. Kimani to introduce himself and to give us a thought of what he thinks about title and discussion of today. You're welcome, Mr. Kimani.
Okay, thank you very much. Yes, my name is Edwin Kimani. I am an advocate of the High Court here in Kenya. About my thoughts on what we're about to discuss, I think it's very timely, considering probably what is happening in Africa, also mainly in Kenya. We have what we consider a serious outflow of the youth coming from Kenya, going abroad, and I would think that there's a lot of brain drain that we're experiencing, same as what we experienced maybe in the 70s, 80s, and sometimes in the 90s. Maybe it shows the tough economic times, shows also maybe the policies that we need to implement that we have neglected, or maybe neglected the role of women and the youth in the implementation of African Continental Free Trade Area. So I think it's a timely discussion. I look forward to it, your questions and engagements.
Thank you, Mr. Kimani. And I would like to ask you if you would just give us a brief understanding on the topic of today, because for most of us, we are just well known about the African Free Continental Trade Area, but I believe with your expertise, you know more about it, especially in the legal aspect. So I would like to ask you if you can give us a brief summary or a brief presentation on the matter.
Thank you again. The African Continental Free Trade Area is a framework established with the main aim of reducing or removing trade barriers between African continent and ensuring that goods and services, as well as data, flows from one country to another without much hindrance. This is aimed at economic empowerment. This is the main pillar, economic empowerment of the whole of Africa, and ensuring that trade increases rather than having trade increasing from outside.
Thank you, Mr. Kimani. And how do you think that this free trade area is beneficial to women and the youth all around Africa? And if you may, you can expand to other countries across the world. How do you think it's very beneficial?
This is how I think it is important, and I'd like to give a very practical example. We have small-scale traders, for example, here in Kenya, or we have, I'll give an example of Tanzania. Tanzania seems to be well endowed with maybe maize, food and timber, and currently we have a shortage of the same here in Kenya. Considering that there are those maybe in the construction industry, it will be beneficial that they are able to access these the food, for example, in order to sell in retail and also to grow the construction industry here in Kenya. My honest assessment is that with trade, yes, we have so much to gain, but then not everyone gains from trade. I'll also give another practical example. At the moment, with the new government that we are having, we are talking about liberalizing parts of the agricultural industry. Some of the farmers here in Kenya are complaining that we are going to have, for example, very cheap milk from Uganda. To a large extent, these are going to be losers. However, they have to adapt. They have to adapt. We have to see that factors of production and capital come down so that we can be competitive. Trade is supposed to benefit the majority, but it's not supposed to benefit everyone. So the youth, yes, are going to, if they are well positioned, are going to benefit from it. However, if they cry for protectionist policies, then they are not going to benefit from it. I'll also give an example of the sugar industry here in Kenya. It has been enjoying safeguards, and these are protectionist policies for the longest time. Briefly, it was liberalized. We had sugar from Uganda coming. It was very cheap. Consumers went for it very much. Producers complained very much, especially farmers, and therefore the government resorted again to protectionist. Um, the consumers are the winners. However, when it comes to the producers in this industry, they are the main losers, largely because the cost of production is very high here in Kenya. We have market capture. At the moment, we are talking about 56% of the industry being controlled by one family. We have more than 80% of the milk industry being controlled by one family. And if it is liberalized, chances are we are going to see at a small scale producers who could be women and the youth who are largely disadvantaged, taking advantage of this and winning.
All right, Mr. Kimani, thank you for that brief presentation. I would like to welcome any participant who is with us right now who would like to ask any question to Mr. Kimani concerning our title for today.
Yes, Caroline. Edwin, we have been seeing a number of mechanisms that are a number of agenda that have been established in Africa and other part of the world, trying to that are most of them are toothless in terms of enforcing these agendas. What is AfCFTA's mechanism to make sure that countries adapted the agenda despite the fact that they have signed and ratified? For example, Tanzania has signed and ratified the AfCFTA, but what are the mechanisms to make sure that more countries they are enforcing what they agree from the agenda?
Okay. I believe this, and this is my position. I think it's a little bit early for that, and the reason is this. Once we talk about liberalization of the economy of Africa, and we're talking about the African Continental Free Trade Area, we are not talking about enclosing Africa and preventing it from engaging in trade or opening up itself to other economies elsewhere. However, we have the legal mechanisms set forth that follow the WTO model. The African Continental Free Trade Area seems to be very weak on our enforcement mechanisms. And I would think this is very tragic. This is a pattern that we have seen at the AU. It's something that critics say that follows what Africa does mostly on protection of despots and totalitarian governments. For example, if you have a decision maybe against a country on its policies, what are the enforcement mechanisms it can take? One of them is engaging the country. We have maybe the country can take sanctions. However, if we look at the exact text of the African Continental Free Trade Area, we don't see much on enforcement. I would think this must be something very strong. And in also my position that I would say that we also need strong human rights position taken on countries engaging in trade. And the reason is this. We would want good practices maybe in production. We don't want to see much of slave or forced labor cost on our production of goods and services. We also want to see free of persons within the economies. And we also want to see that over and above the African Continental Free Trade Area, the AU has a say, for example, in monitoring progress and enforcing disciplinary measures taken against countries. That will be my position. However, yes, I realize that we don't have much, and this to me is a tragedy, because this is one of the prerequisites of failures. This is one of the prerequisites of failures, and I'll give another example, a strong example. At some point I had given it. The Kenya-Uganda trade dispute with regards to, for example, milk and the confectionery industry, that is largely sugar. The matter cannot be decided by the East African Court of Justice. However, it is decided by the apex of the East African community, that is the presidents. And in my opinion, this is a weakness. We need a strong judicial position on this, so that countries are allowed to take action against those who are violating these terms that they have entered into. At the moment, that is not quite available. We also have the trade disputes between Kenya and Tanzania, largely on the chicken industry, something that should have been followed up by the judicial arm of the East African community, but it was not. So that is my position on.
Yes, Edwin, thank you so much. I have another questions. We have seen most of African Union positions never being taken serious by most of the African leaders, and sometimes the policies of their countries. Now we have AfCFTA. Do you think this will be implemented? Because we have seen the African unions and all the agenda and the position never been taken serious. Do you think AfCFTA will be implemented in Africa?
That's a very good question. It's here is my very practical answer to that. I mean, my sincere position on whether AfTA could be Africa Continental Free Trade Area could be successful is this: it's largely dependent on what individual governments do, and that is sensitizing their citizens on the benefits and the existence of this African Continental Free Trade Area. I give an example here of, for example, Kenya. We speak to very many students. They don't know about the African Continental Free Trade Area. Very many businesses don't know about this African Continental Free Trade Area. We had the first shipment of coffee, I think it's coffee or tea, to Ghana under the framework of the African Continental Free Trade Area. And this to me was significant in that it showed that very few elite companies or organizations know about the existence of this African Continental Free Trade Area. For it to be successful, we must move the discussions from boardrooms, we must move the discussions from Zoom, take them to the ground and talk to the producers, that is the farmers, the manufacturers, on the existence of this. We must have policies in place, and the policies must be enforced to ensure that companies really, and that is the producers, the consumers, benefit from the African Continental Free Trade Area. Otherwise, we are going to have a very lofty document, a very good document, like the very many protocols here we have here in Africa that are meaningless to the people. We can talk about the Abuja protocol, for example. However, very few people know about them. I can actually say that actually very few law students, if we were to be specific, know about this document. They probably have heard about it, but they don't know about it.
So speaking of the issue of employment, in most countries, we have a number of youth in most countries. I mean, the population of youth is so high in most of the African countries. And we have the issue of unemployment. Now, we have issues of unemployment within the countries, and now we are opening our borders. Do you think our young people will get more opportunities, or will be small opportunities as we are opening for African continental, as we open our borders for free movement of goods and services?
Thank you for that question. It's a very timely question. It's a discussion that we are having here in Kenya. It's also a discussion I'm seeing in maybe Europe and the US. So to be very specific, what is the role of migrants maybe within the economy? And this is my position. We have the good, we have the bad. It will be very good in that we have people with capital who can find markets here and there and exploit the markets and thereby create employment. Because once we're looking at employment, we're not just looking at the employment of individuals to other organizations. We are also looking at people starting organizations and employing themselves as well as other people. There is that very big advantage of capital inflow. Well, there is also the disadvantage maybe of crowding out of certain sectors of the economy. But we can't really say that indeed that's a very huge disadvantage, because people have to adapt market trends. People have to adapt to what the consumers want. So, for example, if we have migrants maybe coming from Tanzania coming to this country of ours, Kenya, and they have the skills. If they have the skills and they get employed and they are affordable, then there is totally nothing totally wrong with that. I would think that's a very good thing to the producers, because the cost of production goes down. Then we have population of skills and transfer of skills. And if so, they decide maybe to go back to their country, I would presume that they have been sending money back home. If that is what they do, they have been saving, and thereby by the time they get home, maybe there are people there have developed. The same thing happens when we have the diaspora sending in money, sending in their resources, and they coming back with knowledge and know-how on various things that affect the industry. These are people we look forward to coming back, and also we look forward to them sending remittances. So having people come to our economy, getting employed is not a bad thing, but of course there is a good and the bad. We have international crime. It's something also very big here in Kenya. We have had very big issues of maybe the murder of a senior journalist or something from Pakistan. We have the issues of maybe drugs, but also that's an internal issue, because I would think if law enforcement is weak, if the government is weak, then you expect these kinds of things. It's not really about the people who are coming in. It's what they find when they come in. If they find an opportunity to exploit the weaknesses of government, then what they're doing is being capitalist and bad capitalist, and that's our fault. Yes.
I have a question. So you said that awareness is something that is very important, especially for the people who can benefit from this kind of trade area. Now, my concern is for a lot of African countries, if I must speak, Tanzania, a lot of youth are usually centered at studying to become lawyers, to become doctors, to become engineers. They don't look for other diverse opportunities, such as the ones which are available in the business area. Now, when we try to link with your idea of championing awareness to the people, how would you suggest that we do that? Should we go from school to school, or should we have maybe public conferences, or what is your idea? What should we do so that this awareness can be spread to a very large population?
Once we're having this awareness, what I would presume we're trying to do is to have a change of narrative. Maybe what a good writer once said, the change of a single story. It's something also very prevalent here in Kenya. We have parents pushing their children to become lawyers and all that, but I do teach myself, and one thing I tell my students is that the market will always sort you out. Not everyone who goes to school to be a lawyer will end up a lawyer. Once in a while, people discover themselves and they end up doing other things. They become artists, creatives. They enter the retail market, maybe selling things that they have imported. Maybe they end up acquiring new skills and exploiting the skills. What I would think would be the best thing would be, again, community engagement and targeted engagement. Once we're doing targeted engagement, we are targeting communities maybe within the family setup. We have to show them that we have other unexploited sectors of the economy. We have creatives, for example. We have artists, we have musicians. These are very viable, very viable sectors of the economy. For example, I think Tanzania has a very huge export of its. Their music is very well heard here in Kenya. They dominate the airwaves here, and I think they make quite some good money as compared maybe to their Kenyan counterparts. If we have a change of narrative, then we can be comfortable with maybe our children taking up other roles within the economy and not just being a doctor, a lawyer, because at the end of the day, we might have crowding out of certain sectors of the economy. If we have 80% of the population being doctors, then our export will be the export of doctors. But if we diversify the economy, then we are able to have the whole economy thriving. That is what I would think. So the best thing will be trying to target a change of narrative by targeted community engagement and talking maybe to parents, going to schools, going maybe to when you have maybe Parents' Day, try and engage the parents, make them aware that, you know, there are other people doing well within certain sections of the industry.
Thank you again. Do you have any more questions for Mr. Kimani from the participants who have currently joined us?
Adrian, if I may ask, currently women are estimated to account of 70% of the informal cross-border trades in Africa. And most of them, when engaging to such activities, they have been particularly vulnerable to harassment, violence, confiscation of goods, and even imprisonment. And you have seen that between Tanzania and Kenya. If I remember a woman who tried to brood chickens in Tanzania, we were buying at our border, and also some of the goods were confiscated, and some of the Maasai were imprisoned on our border between Tanzania and Kenya. And we believe the AfCFTA is one solution ahead toward reducing this sort of harassment and violence that our women have been getting time to time. However, in most cases, in most countries, they are still holding of the, a sort of regulations that limits women to trade. Do you think by implementing of free African continental free trade area and what is going currently, is there any way we can resolve the situation?
That's also a very good question. Yes, I remember certain instances. We have that trader who had his chicken banned, the chicks banned at the border. We have so much harassment and violence. And here is my position. We have texts. We have the African Continental Free Trade Area. However, these documents have no force in law unless we enforce them. And we need a change of narrative. I keep pushing this change of narrative because if we're able to look at the question of the informal industry, you will largely hear government officials calling the informal industry by another term, that is illicit trade or undocumented trade. We are not open to the idea that we cannot document all trade. What we have to do is to be able to engage, properly engage policy, engage government, create awareness within government of the essential part of these people play within the economy, not to push them to formality, because pushing them to formality means that they have to scale up quite fast, but maybe push on their registration. And then from there, provide programs that protect these persons from harassment and violence. And that largely falls within the civil society organizations that may litigate on their behalf to change the whole narrative. I would also think that this has to be escalated, not at the national organization. I would think that they are much better positioned to create awareness in government and in communities, to also change a narrative from them being considered as people engaging in illicit trade to people recognized as engaging in informal trade. They form the bulk of trade within Africa. However, there is the expectation, which is something that I have seen also here in Kenya, that we measure the success of trade by having large investors come into the country, opening maybe huge operations, and therefore neglecting or alienating those who engage in informal trade. The informal sector is, I would say, the largest in Africa, and therefore should be recognized and protected, and to ensure that there is no threat to these people, over and above having awareness created in government and in communities, also within the regional economic communities, that is such as the the East African community. We should also have the same pushed as an agenda at the African Union, so that these people can be protected and their role recognized. We should also engage those playing within the informal sector, so that to reduce the suspicion that they have of formality and government. That is create awareness on their rights, and that's why I'm pushing on the issue of human rights. They are recognized, they know their rights, and they are able to seek legal recourse, to make legal recourse affordable to them, so that they can enforce their rights. If they are harassed, if their goods are confiscated and banned, I would presume that it will be in the best interest of the African Continental Free Trade Area that they can approach maybe the regional economic blocs, courts, for enforcement of their rights, not to make it expensive and not to make it far-fetched for them.
Kimani, I have a question. So we have seen the AfCFTA in general. We have seen also a brief on what you think that the EAC does too. But there are modernized countries, for example, England, France, Germany, and they have their own continental trade area. And to my perspective, I think that they are far ahead in terms of development. Do you think that maybe African continents should try benchmarking with those states to see how they do their work, how they implement the policy for our own sake and for the purpose of enabling women and youth to find fruits in the economic activities that they engage in?
Definitely, they should do that. And I would say one of the big reasons is this, that Africans should allow Africans to travel within Africa. We get to realize how difficult it is, for example, for maybe somebody from Somalia to go to enter Kenya, or maybe go to other countries within East Africa. It's also not very easy, for example, for maybe Kenyans to travel to Ethiopia. It's very cumbersome, and there are very many regulations. Just the other day is when South Africa now allows Kenyans to get, I think, visas on arrival and relax the rules on acquiring of visas. If you look at Europe, for example, it's far much easier for Europeans to travel within Europe, work within Europe, and it's something that we should try and benchmark and learn from them, see what we can apply, see what we can tailor make to serve our interests here in Africa.
Do we have any more questions from Evans or from anyone else?
Yes, Edwin, thank you so much by trying to, take us through the issue of the way the European unions are doing. But I'm having a questions based on your past the issue that you mentioned before, the issues of formal business, and it's our sincerely ambition to make sure those businesses are graduating into a formal business. Now we are opening our markets, and this is won't be just for the big businesses or big enterprises. It also be for small enterprises. My question is, do you think there is a chance for small and medium enterprises to survive? As, for example, in Tanzania, now we have small enterprises, and later, and now we have this AfCFTA, and there are more businesses that are coming from Kenya, Rwanda, Uganda, and other countries. Would you think the business, the small enterprises in Tanzania, will be able to, to go through those kind of a competition with the Kenyan enterprises? What do you think?
Well, there is a common misconception that, for example, Kenyan enterprises are very aggressive, or you would be surprised. You go to some towns here, and by 7 a.m., no shop is open. So that's not something to worry about very much. However, I would say this: if markets are opened up, there are winners and there are losers. Big companies will capitalize on the economies of scale. I would also presume that small companies may want to leverage on technology, so that maybe they can take advantage of other markets. And one of the technologies they can leverage on is maybe the existence of the internet. Maybe other channels of communication such as WhatsApp. It's something that I've seen small enterprises here in Kenya used to engage producers, for example, in China, used to engage producers in the rural markets of Kenya, so that goods and services maybe come all the way from the rural area here to maybe the capital without the producer and the seller, the retailer, ever meeting. However, I would like to bring to your attention that, we have other barriers existing, other very big barriers existing. And in as much as maybe we would say that Tanzania is very peaceful, we have spats of violence maybe happening within the borders of Kenya, maybe in Somalia border, and Kenya and Ethiopia. And there isn't a joiner of the East African community, and that is the DRC. Peace and security, for example, is very important for enterprises to grow, whether small or big. And largely, those who are affected are the small ones, because big companies can employ their own private security. However, small ones are exposed. We have small enterprises here in Kenya that went and set up in the DRC. We have heard stories of how they have been affected by the war there. And I think that's one of the things that prompted the East African community to try and stabilize that region, considering its potential in terms of the economies and exploitation of that economy. It's something to ponder about. There have been very good articles on security, which I think it's something that we should also take up as people interested with the African Continental Free Trade Area, and what policies can be used to stabilize regions other than using the military in stabilizing them. Maybe entrenching the rule of law within these places is constitutionalism, something that we can now export from one area to another. Something to wonder about.
Thank you, Edwin. But I also want to ask more question. We are expecting from opening our borders, and some countries they are more advantageous compared to other countries. Some are landlocked countries. Some have more opportunities, like in terms of fertile lands, like Tanzania, DRC, and all that. Some are rich in minerals. How do you think there will be a win-win benefits for those countries with a sort of natural resources and other advantages for their people, or will be like winning-lose? Because if Tanzania have so much advantages compared to Rwanda, then perhaps Tanzania won't be the one who will be winning, rather losing. What do you think about this?
This is my thought. Let me give an example, for example, of Kenya, for example, here. We don't have much of natural resources, that is minerals, oil, gas. However, if you were to compare maybe Kenya and maybe an oil-rich country such as the DRC, you will see that maybe Kenya is doing far much better in terms of the economy. The existence of natural resources or areas of exploitation only serve as a potential until they're properly exploited, and there has to exist policy, and policy largely comes from government. If, for example, a country does not implement policies that ensure that they perform well economically, tap into the potential of the youth, women, those who are marginalized, and various sectors of the economy, then I really don't see how that country can be successful. I'll give an example. If you have, for example, countries such as maybe Zimbabwe with so much mineral resources, but its economic policies seem to very much stifle human rights, the freedom of expression, which is more than just speaking, but maybe artists expressing themselves, then that's why that country is also production of microchips. They're doing very well despite the lack of existence of oil, gas, and some of these natural resources. So very much think it's a matter of the country in itself as an individual and how it implements its policies and what policies it chooses, and the population at large.
Thank you, Edwin. And I have one final question before we wind up our webinar for today. So you spoke about something concerning the change in the constitution and maybe other legal frameworks. Now, I believe that the legal frameworks are most of the foundations for a lot of issues and a lot of problems in society. Now, I would like to question you, do you think that the change in our legal framework should be rooted to the change in the constitution itself, or do you just think that maybe we should just deal with the subsidiary laws which are available in regard to trade and economic activities? Or what do you think? Do you think that there's a need to actually change the constitutions of our countries?
Again, it really depends on the constitution of an individual country. One thing that I reject very much is African countries tending to select or benchmark their constitutions with other constitutions abroad, maybe trying to replicate the American Constitution to a very unique place in Africa. That may not work because we have very unique flora and fauna within that country. This has to be done. Does the Constitution work for the people? Does the legal framework in existence other than the Constitution work for the people? If it doesn't, then it should be reformed. I belong to the school of thought that laws are made to serve human beings, but not as human beings serving the law. We are free people. We stand with the liberty of the people. We want people to express themselves. One of my position has been if we're very much able to liberalize our societies ensure that people can express themselves, be it economically, be it socially, then I would say that we expect cross-pollination of ideas from one area to another, proper movement of people, ensuring that ideas move, capital moves from one area where it is in plenty to where it is not in plenty, properly exploited by existence of good policies and the legal framework. And from there, I largely expect that the welfare of the people will be far much better and the economy will be far much better. So I wouldn't really want to focus very much on the constitution, but I would very much want there to be a legal reform in very many countries to ensure that the people are very much able to express themselves in more aspects than just political.
All right, Mr. Edwin, thank you so much for your wonderful presentation today. I'm very sure that we have learned a lot and we have been able to understand more about the free trade, the free continental trade area in Africa. Thank you so much on behalf of everyone. And this marks the end of our session today. And I would like to wish you a very good evening, sir.
Thank you very much for having me. I look forward to engaging you again, and all the best and have a very good weekend.
Thank you. Same to you too.